This is WRUU-LP, Savannah, Georgia, 107.5 FM, WRUU.org. We are Savannah Soundings, community radio with global soul. You are listening to One Human Nation with your host, Sandy Batiste. This program will be talking about race and race relations in your community and nationally. Our goal is to be open, honest, and productive.
Welcome to the One Human Nation show. I'm your host, Sandy Batiste. Thanks for joining and listening to us as we continue on our journey talking about race and race relations in this country, the wonderful United States of America. And our goal here is to create a safe, honest, open, and productive dialogue about race. The viewpoints expressed in the following program are not necessarily those of WRUU, its license holder, or its staff. In the past several shows, we've been talking about some of the concepts for us to think about when we start talking about race, thinking about race, how it relates to us. And one of the concepts that I've shared with you is in reference to the iceberg culture. And it's thinking about things in terms of what's the external things that we see and how we react to it, whether it's food, flags, festivals, arts and crafts performances, and to really start digging deep in what's below the iceberg, to start looking at internal culture, especially our own experiences. And that's what our guest speakers are talking about. They're sharing some of their internal culture, as well as some of the stories of how they were initially introduced to race and the whole concept of racism. And it's painful. And part of our journey to get to this place where we are one human nation, it's a 3-step process. Reconciliation is the first step. And in order to have reconciliation, that doesn't mean that we're in agreement, but it means that we do have to look honestly and truthfully at our history. And our history is not a white history or a black history or Native American history or Japanese American history. It's our history. It's the history of the United States of America. So we have to get from reconciliation to get to healing, to get to justice. And we talk about healing, and we talk about some of the experiences that you may, or the sensations that you may be feeling. And, you know, we emphasize, especially since the format for this show is really a takeoff from the One Human Race workshops that are operating out of Austin that I participated in. And we were very concerned that, and let people know, part of our communication agreement was, you may have an emotional reaction to something you view, hear, or experience. Be aware of your reactions and responses. Take care of yourself. Try to stay engaged. So that means, since you're listening to this on the radio, don't change the station. So, you know, the divine can be found in the tension. So when you're experiencing tension, and it may be a very innocent thing. It could be something that is surprising of why you're feeling the stress or the tension, and you want to take a closer look at it. So I'll share an experience that happened last week, and it wasn't anything major. It was just something small. It wasn't anything catastrophic, life-threatening. And it was in reference to one of the people at the station. As I was leaving last week, they were like, Sandy, here's some stickers for the station, WRUU, just basic car stickers, nothing big deal. No, it's just an innocent sticker. And as this person was talking to me and trying to get the sticker off to me, I was experiencing some tension. I was experiencing some stress, and I was trying to figure out, okay, what is this about? Of course, I just finished this show, so, my adrenaline is pumping, and I'm thinking, well, maybe it's that. But the more they were working with that sticker, I was like, no, this is something. And so I got the stickers from this person, and I went to my car, and I just kind of sat there for a few minutes just to check in with myself and go, why am I feeling tension about these stickers? Well, it came to me. My internal culture, growing up, we never put stickers on our cars. We never did anything to identify our car, whether it was something in reference to school or church or because we didn't want to be a target. Now, I think part of that was also not having stickers on your car that couldn't be removed and impacting if the car was going to be resold, but we typically kept our cars forever. It was more of a safety issue. So this past week, I started talking to people and saying, okay, let me talk to you about the sticker thing. Did you have any experiences growing up with stickers? And for some people, it was very adamant. And some things are very obvious, where you're thinking about political affiliation. Are you going to put a sticker on your car endorsing a particular candidate or identifying a political party? And it was very interesting, and I'm still gathering information, but I talked to several people of color, and it was an adamant no. We never put stickers on our car. It was not something that was done. I've talked to some people, and they were like, well, maybe if it was a school sticker, then that might have been okay. And I did a little research on the internet, and even with 911, it was very interesting. The people of color, their response, if they were going to put a sticker on their car, it was to support the troops. They would put those stickers on their car, but they didn't feel comfortable putting stickers on that said One Nation. And to me, that's very indicative of what is an underlying problem. When we talk about thinking about internal culture, it sometimes is a very innocent thing. It's not something that may jump out at you as a big experience. But it's important. It's critical. So part of that is, okay, if there is a resistance in car stickers, or and you're involved in making decisions on what's going to be a fundraiser or visibility, it might not be stickers on the car, or it may be just me. So now I'm going to, as you're driving around, take a look at car stickers and see what you see. From last week, I've been observing, and I haven't really seen a lot of cars with stickers. I don't know. Maybe it's just not something that is the trend anymore. Maybe it's just, I just haven't noticed it. But I thought that was interesting. And it's all about being intentional. And when you feel that tension, consider why that tension is there. And I've encouraged you before to even think about when you're checking out of line in the grocery store. How are you feeling about that? Which line are you selecting? When you go into a store, do you have any anxiety, especially if there is a salesperson that's, following you or insistently, constantly asking you every couple of minutes, may I help you? May I help you? So it's interesting. I noticed that less in Savannah than in Austin. But again, maybe it's just me. But it's all about observing and being aware and being awake. So as we think about today's show, and as we continue on this conversation about race and race reconciliation in the United States, it's about everyone being awake and aware and being intentional and learning about other cultures, learning about what's acceptable about personal space in body language, in social situations, tone of voice, and how we handle and displaying of emotions. Any concepts that we have about time, past and future, thinking through roles as it's related to age or sex, any of those things we want to be aware of where are we with our internal culture. And it may be a good idea for you to journal, just to start writing down, okay, what's going on with this. When you take a look at your Sunday, especially if you go to a church service, take a look around and see, okay, what's the environment here? Because historically, Sunday is one of the most segregated days in this country during the 11 o'clock church hour. So think about where you are and the people around you, and because it may not have even crossed your mind. And that's what this is about. It's about getting to that point that we are awake, that we are aware, that we listen carefully to what other people are saying, verbally as well as non-verbally. And as the caller calls in, and they'll be calling in about 4 or 5 minutes, think about the stories that this person is going to be sharing. And sometimes those stories are difficult. So even on the radio, we want to create a supportive environment, because our goal is to have a space that's safe, honest, open, and productive. So we can have some really productive conversations about race. And you can start taking a look at your community and things that you can engage in. So one of the things in moving back to Savannah that I've been trying to check into, so if you are aware of any race reconciliation workshops going on, please let me know. Send an email to mystory@onehumannation.info. I'm gathering data, and I'm enjoying the city and taking in some exhibits and kind of doing the whole touristy thing. So something that I've done this week was to visit the Massey Heritage Center here in Savannah, because they had a display about the education system, and it's entitled Enslavement to Emancipation, the Struggle for Education. And one of the things that jumped out at me in looking at this display, they actually posted the salary for June 30th, 1932. This is year ending June 30th, 1932. And they posted what they would pay a teacher that was white compared to a teacher that was colored. So first of all, it's going to be shocking, the figures that I'm going to give you, because this is annual salary. It's not weekly. It's not monthly. For someone that had 1 year of experience, the average salary for a white teacher was $807.44. This is annual per year. For a colored person, it was $684. Again, annual salary. For someone that had 10 years of experience, for a white person, the annual salary was $1,403.36. For a person of color, particularly a colored person, $1,040. So you can see the difference in income. And then 29 years plus, there was a even larger gap. For a white person, the annual salary was $1,947, and then a colored person, $1,203.97. So part of when we talk about economic inequality, economic disparity, that's one of the things that when you start taking a look at, well, what were people actually making? And of course, the argument now is that teachers don't make that much money either. And I'm not in the teaching world, but I'm sure it's no longer, at least I sincerely hope, it's no longer distinguished, whether someone is white, they're going to make X amount, whether someone is colored, they're going to make this amount. Of course, teachers out there, there may be a different way that the system has adjusted to this as far as what the salary disparities are. And I would be interested in your feedback on that. Again, you can email me at mystory@onehumannation.info. Again, the email address to contact me is mystory@onehumannation.info. onehumannation.info. I hear the caller, so I'm going to take that call, and we'll be right back. Okay, we are back on, and we have our guest on the line. So, Matt, are you there? Can you hear me?
I can. I'm here.
Fabulous. So that all worked out. It's always kind of an interesting world in Sandy's world. It's like, okay, is everything working? So I'm looking at the boards and making sure that we are actually in the mode we need to be in. So, Matt, I know you're calling in from Austin, Texas, so thanks for taking the time out to give us a phone call and talk to us about race and race relations, and just kind of give us a little background. You know, growing up, did you hear any stories about, you know, other people, or what was the context that you grew up in?
Yeah, I've been thinking about this. I grew up in a lot of different places. My parents moved around a lot. But I think of my elementary school years, say preschool through 7th grade, were in Tennessee and Florida. My father taught at various Episcopal boarding and day schools.
Okay.
In Tennessee, we were at an Episcopal boarding school. In Florida, we were at an Episcopal day school. These are the Episcopal Church, and so that's my elementary school. And then we moved briefly to Cambridge, Massachusetts, and then to New Mexico, to Alamogordo, New Mexico. So I've lived in the southeast, the northeast, and the southwest before I went off to college. You know, obviously, my first sort of awareness of sort of race as an issue. I mean, I remember my elementary school is predominantly white, which I can confirm by, you know, when I find my old school pictures. But there were a few African American kids, and none of us. I don't recall thinking about that in any way. What I do remember is when I was first learning about the Civil War, and for some reason this came up when I was rather young, like in first grade, maybe something like that, was some class unit, and we were talking. The class was talking about slavery and the enslavement of Africans and enslavement of African Americans, and I suddenly was just sort of shocked and horrified that such a thing had happened. And I remember going to my mother and being like, "This is awful. This is really really scary thing." And she was like, "Yeah, it was, but it's not happening anymore, right? You don't have to worry about that." Because I was actually worried about it happening to me.
Right.
In the way that a kid can be totally self-centered,
Exactly.
right? This is terrible, and it's what if it happened to me? That'd be even worse.
Exactly.
And that was the first that I was like, oh wow, and I don't think I really quite understood it. What I do also remember, like looking back on it, is as I continued to learn about the Civil War as I went through elementary school, at the time, there was always this, slavery was an issue, but it was really about states' rights. And I thought, even at the time, it seems like the right that they were most concerned about was the right to own slaves. So that does seem to be crucial. Why was always saying, oh, well, really it seemed to me like a perfectly reasonable thing to try to prevent happening. But, that was I think that was a bit of the narrative about that. I had one other story I wanted to share, too, that was kind of one of those whoa moments for me. My grandfather was an Episcopal priest, and really originally a missionary. In the 1940s, he went to Liberia and served in Liberia as kind of one of the last of the great missionaries, or great white missionaries going off to Africa. He loved it. He loved doing this stuff, and he had already met my grandmother, and she came out and married him in Liberia and stayed there for several years while he worked there. And so, they would tell stories about this when I would visit them. And my grandmother would be talking about life in the missionary compound in Africa, and she kept talking about these two boys who would help her. These boys would help her do this, these boys would help her do that. And in my mind, I'm thinking boys like me at the time, like 12 years old, right?
Right.
10 years old. This is what I'm thinking. And some of the stories, it was a little odd. It's like these young boys are carrying, lots of stuff,
It's like, how come those boys are so much stronger than you, right?
Yeah, right, exactly. This is what I'm thinking. And then finally, one day she gets out this photograph, and these are grown men, right?
Yeah.
And this is my grandmother.
Right.
my sweet little grandmother is talking this way. And I was like, and actually, honestly, at the time, I was completely bumfuzzled. I was like, why is she calling them boys? I was utterly bumfuzzled. It wasn't until my father was telling me something later, and he was like, be very, very careful. Never, use a term boy for, an African American man. People used to say that and call them that all the time. So just, watch yourself. Don't do that by accident or anything. And
Right.
That's when I went, oh, that was what was up with my grandmother. So yeah, it was. There's kind of experiences like that where I really remember it the most.
Right. And so tell me a little bit about your college experience when you had the negative experience of what happened when you went off to, was it the University of Chicago?
Yeah. So I went to the University of Chicago, and suddenly I was in probably the most diverse environment I'd ever been in. So there were folks from Korea and Japan and Central Asia and the Near East, and then kids from all around. And then the University of Chicago is on the south. It's like a funny little island on the south side of Chicago,
Okay.
Which surrounded by neighborhoods that are almost entirely African American, if not entirely. Chicago has hyper segregation, where you can cross a street in Chicago, and the racial composition of people is completely different on the other side of the street. So anyway, so it was there we were, and my apartment got robbed, and at the time I was studying to be an archaeologist. I had done a fair amount of field work and was well along in my studies, and my apartment gets robbed. So I've got to file a police report. So, the police precinct is outside the little island. And so it's an interesting bus ride over to the police precinct, and I go in and work my way through the system to this poor desk sergeant who's taking this information, because we both know nothing's going to get solved, and but I have to do this for insurance purposes, right?
Right.
And so he's just, taking the information. He's talking about, where you're a student at the university, the University of Chicago, just down the street, And he says, what do you, and he was African American, and he says, what are you studying? And I said, archaeology. And he looks at me and he says, not a lot of brothers doing archaeology, are there? And it suddenly, I had never, he was right. He was absolutely right. At the time, I couldn't think of a single one that I'd ever met, and it suddenly dawned on me that this job, or doing archaeology as a career, choosing to do that, was a very privileged thing. I didn't have that language for it at the time, but I thought, he's right. And he kind of went on. He was like, yeah, if you're going to go to school for that long, after you've been poor, you're going to be a doctor. You're going to be an attorney. You're going to do an MBA. You're not going to waste all that education on being an archaeologist. And I thought, there's a lot of truth to that. And suddenly realized that, unbeknownst, it was always assumed that I could do that. My parents, sure, you want to be an archaeologist, go do that. Wasn't anything that seemed odd.
Right. So yeah, that's definitely, I can't think of many. I'm sure it's changed. Hopefully, I don't know. I don't know what the profession is for archaeologists. So we're going to take a short break, but if you can stay on the line, and we're going to come back, because I do want to get some of the most recent developments going on in your world that I would like to share with our listeners. So if you can hold on, and we will be right back.
Okay, absolutely. Thanks.
As a business, if you enjoy our programming on WRUULP, please support the station with a donation. Let your customers, neighbors, and friends know that you share our vision of building a thriving community based on diverse, vibrant radio programming. As a business partner, our listeners will know you support Savannah's only broad-based community radio station. Become a tower sponsor or underwriter. To check out the levels of corporate sponsorship and to donate, go to www.wruu.org/corporate. Again, to check out the levels of corporate sponsorship and to donate, go to www.wruu.org/corporate. Thank you for listening to and supporting WRUULP. WRUULP, Savannah, Georgia, 107.5 FM, WRUU.org. We are Savannah Soundings, community radio with global soul. So, Matt, are you there?
I'm still here.
Okay, great. So I wanted to talk to you about some of your recent experiences counseling people, and I thought it was interesting when you shared with me, how you talk to people and when you were telling them about to follow their dreams, and what kind of response did that get for you?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. So as an archaeologist, I worked in various places in the U.S., but I also worked in South America, in Bolivia and Peru, among folks who are very traditional indigenous populations, and the idea of sort of follow your dream, I began realizing, kind of rings very hollow when you're poor. It's sort of a you get these kind of blank stares, like, no, I'm going to do whatever I can to put food on the table,
Right.
And I don't have any illusions that this is necessarily going to be meaningful or soul-filling work. That I'm going to feel lucky if I've got enough regular work to not worry about feeding my kids and not worrying about buying them their stuff for school and their clothes and their things like that. And it became pretty clear to me that to be able to say follow your dream is something that a large population of the world that's just kind of crazy talk, or just totally nonsensical. And I encountered that here in this country as well. I work now. I'm a priest in the Episcopal Church, and I serve a multicultural community that has both English speakers, they're fairly diverse, and not quite representing the proportions of different ethnicities in our neighborhood perfectly, but a fairly diverse set of English speakers. Plus a Spanish-speaking, first-generation immigrants and their children, it's I'll give you an example. It's one of the things I try my best to work on when say I'm doing a quinceañera for a girl for her 15th birthday,
Right.
And I don't know how many people know about this, but it's a big deal, and you have a special church service, and then a big reception. And it's kind of a coming of age, rite passage kind of thing for 15-year-old girls from predominantly Mexico, but also Central America as well. And I try very hard to talk to the girl, find out what her dreams are, and then in my preaching kind of encourage people to support that as best I can, and I have to always be aware that, simply saying, oh, let her follow her dream is going to
Right.
be something that's a little bit out there. But I also do want to implant the idea that she's got a lot of value. She can bring a lot to the world. And she's got gifts and that's still usually the way I work on it, is she's got gifts that the world needs. But, something I grew up with, simply assuming. I mean, my parents were just barely the generation just before the baby boomers, just barely.
Right.
They were born in 1944, and they definitely were kind of, follow your bliss, follow your dream. You want to go be an archaeologist, go for it, and I sort of assumed everybody, had the same background, and that's very much not the case.
Well, yeah, and it's very interesting in the African American culture. There is definitely a push for education but it's more from the, I think it's more from the standpoint, at least it was in my family, of, and it wasn't exactly put this way, but it was to the effect of you have to do more, you have to have more education. The playing field is not level, so
Right.
it's you've got to go above and beyond, and even going with above and beyond, you may still not get the recognition or the raise or the position. So it was kind of a double-edged sword of how we were pushed in the direction of education, how critical it was to get your education. I think that's still true for a lot of families and what they instill in their children. So, but now it does explain to me why you're so fluent in Spanish, because I couldn't figure that out, when I...
Oh.
Because I've heard you speak Spanish. I'm like, God, he does that so well, and so now...
Well, it sounds good to a non-native speaker. I have a pretty heavy-duty...
I did recognize the twang, when you were speaking Spanish, but you still got it out, so you've got my respect for that, as well as you were one of the first churches to host one of the One Human Race initiative, the workshops that we do, which are 3 Saturdays, which I know for a church or any organization to commit to that, going back to back 3 Saturdays in a row is a huge commitment of time and facilities. I'd like to get your opinion, because I think that was in 2015 that occurred at St. John's, and I'm wondering what have you observed about the impact for the people in your church that attended those workshops? I mean, did it make a difference? How did it make a difference? Kind of what's been the difference that you've noticed? Because I think when you did that, you were relatively new at that particular church also as their rector. So can you share what do you think the impact of participating in those workshops were for your congregation?
Well, it was absolutely transformational for many people, for the people who came. You are absolutely right. I was right in my first year. I hadn't even completed a year yet, I don't think, or it was right around the anniversary. And that was 2015, and it feels to me that was, Ferguson had hit late 2014, right? And then that seemed to open the floodgate, so to speak. I mean, it was just a terrible year, right?
It was. It was.
Of these things, and I was shocked and horrified, and it was like, well, what can we as a church do? And that's when you guys were getting in touch with me, and it really worked out well. And so I was really pushing and encouraging people. Even in my preaching, I would say, what can you do? Well, you can go learn, right?
Right.
You can. The thing to do is to start by learning, and the series is very well set up. And you remember, I've had some sort of not quite as good training of that sort of thing before, and so we met and you showed me the curriculum, and I was like, okay, good. There's
you were a little hesitant. I had a feeling that there was some kind of bad experience there, but so
I had done an anti-racism training, which is required of all people who want to be clergy in the Episcopal Church, that was very good at making you aware of your privilege, making you aware of things that were not fair, not just, not right, and then it ended. There was no resurrection, right? There was, in Christian terms, it ended in the tomb with the door shut, and that was that, right? And everybody was so demoralized that and this was seminarians. These people are generally on your side, and we were all just like, oh, there's nothing I could do. It's just awful. There's nothing I could do, and so that's what I was worried about. And when I looked at your curriculum and listened to how you guys put it together, and how you insisted on it being over several days, because mine was all one afternoon,
right? And
you were just about a puddle by the time that you were done, because it's very emotional, right?
Yes, it is.
And if you care at all, right, then you're really feeling bad. And so what was really good about it was both the the series you'd watch, the video you would watch, it was very information rich and nuanced, and then the ability to have a safe, well constructed environment to talk through questions and sudden realizations, and be able collectively then to come together and begin figuring out how to put this to you, looking towards resurrection.
Right. Right.
Now that we know this, what types of things can we do differently? And I mean, it was. And so everybody who took it, everyone learned something new, re-examined the way they thought about race, and this includes some of my African American.
Right. It is two-sided. Yes. I
remember one of mine saying, "I actually thought that we just had a gene for sports," and I was thinking, boy, I've been so careful to never say that, even
right?
Suggesting that, right? Anything like that, and that was an eye opener to me. I mean, that was wonderful, way to learn how we all pick up this kind of stuff, right?
Right.
From our culture, no matter how careful we are, or how intentional we are, we can always learn a lot more. And I would say, the burden is on Anglos to really take opportunities to learn about an experience you haven't had, because, like I was telling you in my first story, it never dawned on me that anybody wouldn't think they could just become an archaeologist, right? It just never dawned to me. So I think it's a very well put together program.
Thank you.
That is worth the time. So I was very impressed with it, and I know it has changed the dialogue we have around race and things like that here at this church. So I was very appreciative, and we're bringing it back in 2018.
Yes,
I'm on the list.
You're on the list,
year.
Exactly. So I'm taking a look at the time, and so I do want to be conscious of that. And are there any other thoughts you want to share? Any first steps that you want to recommend for someone that is Anglo, as far as what they can do if they're, at that place in their journey that they would like to learn more?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, actually, I mean, so if you are and you're wanting to learn more, that's good. That's very good.
Right.
I think definitely seeking out these One Human Race type trainings. There's something called the Kaleidoscope Institute,
right.
Which is a very, very good training on multiculturalism. And I should add, archaeologists are all trained anthropologists first. I mean, that's archaeology is a subfield of that.
Right.
And anthropology is the study of cultural diversity, is really what it's about. But even I had, a lot. There's a difference between studying a group and a culture for the information it provides and like really trying to understand and learn and
right.
live that culture's experience. And so I have benefited. If I can benefit from these things, everybody can benefit from them. And I might also say, if you have a bad experience, hang in there. Try something else. Okay,
yes.
I had a bad experience, right?
Right.
But, I had that one, and then I did two others that were definitely better. Back in the first diocese I served in, I was on a little team helping them develop a new anti-racism training, and I was mostly just providing comment. But I've always taken every chance that I can get to learn, even if sometimes I've kind of heard that before.
Right.
I always pick up something new. It's sort of like first aid classes. I had a job where I had to take a first aid refresher course every year,
right.
just as for the job. And yeah, it was a little bit boring because I already knew this and that. But you always pick up something new,
right?
And And the more you can, you're never going to understand another culture as completely as a member of that culture can, right?
Right.
But you can build a lot of compassion, empathy, and understanding that helps you draw closer to other people. And I think that the more that we can do that, the better.
Well, you said it very well, and I guess that's a good wrap up for us with your interview and insights. And I appreciate you sharing and all you do to support the One Human Race initiative. And I don't like to say goodbye, so I'll say until we meet again.
Till we meet again, yes, I look forward to that. I'm sure. Now I need an excuse to head out to your neck of the woods.
Yes,
So
absolutely. So the door is always open. You are invited to attend. Yes, to visit. I'm loving it. So thanks again, Matt, and take care. And I'll be talking to you soon.
All right. Same to you.
Okay.
And God bless. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Well, thank you for listening to One Human Nation, and you're listening to WRUULP Savannah, Georgia, 107.5 FM, WRUU.org. We are Savannah Soundings Community Radio with Global Soul. So the interview that we had with Matt, and he also let you know that he is a priest. I do want to provide this disclaimer at this point that the viewpoints expressed in the preceding program are not necessarily those of WRUU, its license holder, or its staff. So as we continue on and just some wrap up in preparing for the next show in next week, I think one of the important takeaways from the interview with Matt was how it's important to be intentional. And he definitely put it out there that it's even more important for Anglos to kind of get to that level. And I can only speak for myself as a Black person. There is, I call it fatigue. That's the best word that I can come up with it. There is a certain amount of fatigue of having to tell the stories from a Black or an African American perspective, because we've been telling these stories for years and years and years. And I'm just amazed coming back into Savannah and all of the historical and some of the names that I see. I can remember my parents mentioning those names and what was going on in the community. And for some reason, it didn't have as much of an impact when you're younger. And now, looking back on it, I realized that it was all important stuff. It was all the foundation, and the struggle continues. And it's not to say that there's a sob story or there's woe is me, because we figure out how to work around it. But it does get to a point that you're like, okay, Sandy, you want me to tell my story? And yes, I think we all have to continue to have the dialogue. And that's what the purpose of the One Human Nation show is all about, is we have to continue to talk. We have to continue to share our stories. We have to be open to other cultures. And I hope you are taking a look at your cities and your communities and, engaging in some cultures that, there is a different language and the food is different and the culture is different. And it doesn't mean that you have to necessarily change what church you go to or which organizations you belong to, but just venture out to expose yourself to more. So that we can start the healing process, to get through the reconciliation process, so we can get to healing, so we can get to social justice. And I hope you tune in next week, Thursdays from 5 to 6. Eastern Standard Time. That's when the One Human Nation show airs on WRUU 107.5 FM, and you can stream directly from www.wruu.org. So you can go to the station website and actually stream on the program. I do invite you to visit the One Human Nation website, and that's onehumannation.info. I do have a couple of documentaries up there that I've mentioned, and I encourage you to take a look at those. And it may be painful. It may be that it creates some tension in you, but I encourage you to take a look at them, because that's we'll start getting into more of what those documentaries are talking about. And the two that stand out to me is the one that's entitled The Story We Tell, because it gets into our housing history. And The House I Live In is another documentary that gets more into our mass incarceration system and the war on drugs and how that was targeted. And so it's about learning, no matter how difficult it is. It's about learning and being open to the experience. And if you'd like to connect with me, the best way to do that is to send me an email at mystory@onehumannation.info. Next up is Sound Limit with Troy Stoner. Thanks for listening to the One Human Nation show, and I hope you have a very interesting week and continue on your journey of learning more about different cultures in our country.